Heard the principals speak today. Mark, what are your big takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll start with Ben Johnson, Dan, since he's the one that just spoke, and then I'll give you my summary of Ryan Poles as well. And I'll just go through some of the things that I thought listening to Ben Johnson that I really can't wait to see what he does with Caleb Williams once he gets his hands on him, because he said today, he reiterated today, and I know everybody loves Caleb Williams for his off-script plays. Ben Johnson really loves Caleb Williams for his off-script plays. He called it demoralizing to defenses, and he has said something that he has made similar comments in the past. He has not yet been able to be around that in any of his coaching stops, whether it's Detroit or Miami, now with the Bears. He's not been around this type of quarterback. He did great things with Jared Goff, but this is a different animal, so I can't wait to see what he does with him. A few other things here. I'll just go through these, and you guys could react to what I'm saying, and then I'll get on to Ryan Poles. But I love too that, and we probably could have came up with this statement as well, but Ben Johnson made a point of saying that he didn't hire, we're getting to meet the entire coaching staff now. He says he didn't hire a bunch of friends unpurposely. He said he went outside of his circle, which I love. Analytics is probably going to be a thing with Ben Johnson, as if it already hasn't been, but he kind of went out of his way to mention his computer science background and his math background, so be ready for that. Yes, he, like everybody else, would like to see the Bears upgrade their pass rushing situation. He didn't have a problem with somebody bringing up Myles Garrett's name. He didn't specifically praise Garrett, but he did say he didn't deny that possibility. He also said he looks forward to working with DeAndre Swift, with whom he worked in Detroit. I thought that was interesting. Yeah, those were the kind of the main takeaways that I had with DeAndre Swift. I'm sorry, with Ben Johnson. Quickly, I'll give you guys 3 bullet points too that I came away with on Ryan Poles. I thought it was like, I asked him the question, Ryan Poles, about obviously he's collaborated with Matt Eberflus in the past, and that's always been the buzzword that we're all working together, but my idea is that Ben Johnson is probably going to have a little more say than Matt Eberflus did, but Poles would not go that far as to say that it'll be any different with Ben Johnson. I think the biggest thing for Ryan Poles right now is free agency versus the draft. You've got good resources in both areas. How's he going to split it up? What's he going to go for? What's he going to use what for what? So no, I didn't think there was anything giving us enlightening on that. I do think that it was interesting that he was asked this very specific question about the running backs room, Ryan Poles was, and the question was, is there personnel that do you have the personnel you need at running back? And he never said yes. He said, we're going to take a look at that. We're going to figure out what needs to be done. So I don't know if that's something I should be reading into, because he did not mention, he didn't say what he usually says, Ryan Poles, and that is, we already have guys in the room. He did not say that. And then the last thing, I'm sure you guys have latched onto this, Ben Johnson very, very intrigued with, or Ryan Poles very intrigued with the IQ of a Ben Johnson relative to what he's been working with in the past.
Mark, that was shade, right? That was
really
straight shade.
He's like, wait a second, this guy, wow, this guy actually thinks and talks.
I don't think Ryan Poles meant to do that, because he's just the last guy in the world that would throw somebody on, especially Matt Eberflus. He propped up Matt Eberflus every opportunity he had. Remember when the bleep was hitting the fan?
Until he had to fire him. Yeah.
Well, yes, and he understood what had to be done, but yes.
Okay, so let's go back to what you were talking about with the running back room. Here's why I'm interested in that, because I'm not sure what they'll do to address that. It would seem like the draft would be the smart way to go with that, but free agency could be an option. I mean, can you envision them going and using a high draft pick on a running back? I know there's a lot of talk about Ashton Genty and some other guys, but I'm just wondering how you interpret the way that question was answered.
I can't imagine. I would think that with a third-round pick, a fifth-round pick, a sixth-round pick, and 2 seventh-round picks, Marshall, that somewhere in that line you could go up, you could get a running back. So I think it would be cheaper, obviously, to do something like that through the draft. If because I kind of got both sides today. I felt like the way Ben Johnson was talking about DeAndre Swift, he made it sound like DeAndre Swift would be around, and he would, and DeAndre Swift probably will be around no matter what. It's just a matter of whether or not they go out and get another guy to compete with him that they think could potentially surpass him. But I would think that if they're going to do running back, that it would probably be late in their draft. However, there's always the one caveat, and that is and we all know this, during Ben Johnson's time in Detroit, they were not afraid to color outside of the lines in terms of what people thought they should get. And they were going best player available, playmaker, Jahmyr Gibbs. So it's not completely crazy. I don't think it's going to happen at number 10, but it's not crazy to think that somebody like Ashton Genty would be somebody the Bears would look at if they follow, some of the script from the Detroit days, which they've made a point of saying that they're not going to necessarily do.
The other big thing that jumped out to me on this, Grote, is the way that both of these guys, Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles, talked about free agency versus the draft, and they talked about supply and demand. What did you make of the supply and demand? I mean, is that them basically saying we feel like there's enough good offensive and defensive linemen either through free agency and or the draft to figure this out?
I'm struggling with this one a little bit, Marshall, in terms of where they might put their resources into which positions. He did make a point of, let's talk about the interior of the Bears offensive line. I mean, you have all three of those positions are free agents. So Ben Johnson was asked the question, is it realistic to think that you could flip 3 offensive linemen? And he said,
yes.
And yes, you can do that. And it makes me wonder if they go to, the well of, whether it is Trey Smith, we've talked about him, whether it's Kevin Zeitler, whether it is Mekhi Becton. These are all free agent interior offensive linemen for people who haven't really been reading up as of yet. I understand that it's early right now to start to hear.
Never too early, though, Mark. Never too early.
No, absolutely. And so you've got those guards that are there in free agency. I don't know how they evaluate the rest of the group, like the offensive, like the guys who would be second-round picks or maybe third and fifth and sixth-round picks. We know somebody like Kelvin Banks out of Texas, of course. He glitters atop the draft board, but it'll be very, very interesting to see what philosophically where they are, offensive line and defensive line and the other positions, but we know what's super important for the Bears right now and how they use their resources. It would be silly for me to sit here and tell you guys that I know exactly how they're going to divvy this up. We just don't know that yet.
A couple things I wrote down from what Johnson had to say and the things that I put a star next to. One was when he started talking about the offense, whatever this offense is going to be, he started at breaking the huddle. Huddling, breaking the huddle, cadence, motion, shifts. All things that Caleb Williams was not very good at last year. And we can talk all we want about the off-schedule stuff. The point being, we have to get into this mentality. The play doesn't start at the snap. The play under Ben Johnson and the effectiveness of the play begins maybe at the huddle break or maybe before.
Yeah, and for better or for worse, the idea of going back to the basics and learning how to get in and out of the huddle, this is something that has been going on since, you don't want to hear it, but you have to hear it. I remember Matt Nagy saying that with Mitch Trubisky. We're just going to work on getting, because there's not a lot of huddling in college. We're going to getting in the huddle, getting out of the huddle, as you said, Dan, the cadence. But no, I mean, that just tells you what a big issue that was. Yep. And look, Caleb Williams, there was a lot of stuff that Caleb Williams himself has to work on. Look, there was plenty of stuff around him that we know was bad. They had the wrong coaching staff. They had the wrong offensive line, especially in the interior last year for the Bears. But Caleb Williams himself has plenty to improve on, including that cadence. It was in training camp that that it was a big deal, and it almost felt like it was taken care of. They were joking around about it. It really never got fixed. So this is 1 year, because I heard the same stuff with Justin Fields and sort of getting in and out of the huddle and just the basics and all that kind of stuff. This is real. Like this there is stuff that he was not taught properly, or at least not driven home the right way by the previous coaching staff, and that's stuff that Caleb Williams is going to have to get better at.
This was next that I had starred, talking about the offensive line. This is important, not the defense. He's talking about the offense, was Ben Johnson. Quote, the best football players, they finish around the ball. And I loved that, because I saw too many offensive linemen fall down at the snap or engage on a block and then fall down, and they finished down, sitting there.
Yeah,
and if
comically, Dan,
yes,
comically at times.
Yes, at times comically. But if this mentality is an offensive mentality to finish around the ball, when you're talking about the blockers, get where you need to be and help out the guy who's trying to move that thing down the field, I like it.
Yeah, no, I love that idea, that concept. One of the things too, we're talking about offensive line. He mentioned, rebuilding the offensive line. One thing I don't know and regret not having asked, and not really didn't have the opportunity to, but that is, what is the body type they are looking for as far as offensive linemen are concerned? Is it like, do they want the big guys? Like once upon a time, Juan Castillo. Let's grow these guys. Your classic large guy.
Right,
and
Matt Pryor would be an example of that, of a guy who's just enormous.
Yeah, well, which is ironic because Ryan Poles then talked about how he wants the smaller, quicker offensive lineman. I don't know with this offensive line coach at this point what the body type is for these guys, but. To your point, yeah, it's got to be a whole different mentality. It's not just the guys that can block and pass and pass protect. It's that mentality of being around the ball. He did make a point of saying, it's not going to be magic. These guys have to learn to work together and work as a unit. All those cliche things we hear about offensive line, but again, in this case, a lot of the things that he's saying, these are real things when we talk about going back to the basics, as we talked about with the QB and now the offensive line too.
Going back to Ryan Poles and the way he was discussing, or not Ryan Poles, I'm sorry, Ben Johnson, the way he was discussing Dennis Allen and the talks they've had about affecting the passer with the pass rush or on the back end. What do you think about their prioritizing offensive line where you have several spots where really you just need one or two? I mean, you need a bunch, but one or two. You need somebody else to pair with Montez Sweat to make bad things happen for opposing quarterbacks.
Absolutely. I mean, that's got to be priority one. And you really, and you got to go beyond that too. Of course, you want that demolisher on the opposite side, and somebody who could obviously, with Montez Sweat let's face it, Montez Sweat did not have a good year last year, and maybe there was injury reasons for it, but let's just call it what it is. It was not. You have to be better if you're Montez Sweat, considering what they invested in him. So now, yes, you need to get another edge rusher, and then you got to figure out what is going on in the middle of that defense. We know that Andrew Billings isn't going anywhere. We also know that Zach Pickens seems to be going somewhere, and that's off the roster, it sure feels like.
Really?
Well, I don't know that for sure. I shouldn't be careless with that, Dan. It just, with him being benched last year, essentially that's what happened at the end of the season, being benched without an injury whatsoever, like not even being dressing. It really just makes me wonder about how long Zach Pickens is going to be around, but we'll see as we get closer. Gervon Dexter, though, I was talking about this with some of the reporters, and I brought up the question: was Justin Jones a better 3 technique than what they have gotten from Gervon Dexter so
Maybe.
far? I'd say probably yes. I mean, it's probably close, but I'm not saying oh you should have kept Justin Jones. That's not my point. But my point is you were supposed to get an upgrade out of Gervon Dexter. It hasn't happened yet. I'm not saying it can't, but that you got to think about the middle of the line, and that's really like anybody who is asking me right now, and I think that this is all subject to change with the weird order of things, with it being free agency being first. But look, man, if you can get your hands on Mason Graham out of Michigan, even his teammate Kenneth Grant, there's some guys who are three techniques in this draft that I think you'd step in and not have the learning curve as much as somebody like Gervon Dexter did. But that's probably dreaming a little bit to Mason Graham at number 10, but we'll see.
Where are we after today in stated expectations as we continue to make sure we're holding them to what they say and what they've set? I know there were some questions that kind of came at it from some different angles, but when is the right time to really make them say how good they think they can be?
Yeah, I think, Dan, that's probably. I think we're going to have a much better idea, and this is after free agency. And that question was not asked like today, just for the record. Like, what is this? Should this team be expected to be a playoff team? Should they be? I mean, there was indications of that on the introductory press conference from Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles. If you put this thing back together, they have not given any indication that this is going to be a rebuilding year or that there should be some excuse this year. No, it really.
The closest he came was to saying an offensive line reconstruction takes time.
Yes, he did. He did say that, but we all know. And not because necessarily that Caleb Williams is going to be great. I still happen to think Caleb Williams is going to be great. But, again, the whole rookie quarterback thing. You are on the clock right now, if I may quote my own show. Bears are on the clock with Caleb Williams and having this rookie quarterback. So you got to get him good fast. You got to get him improved fast, I should say. And you definitely, the playoffs do have to be the expectation. But we didn't hear any of those words come out of their mouth today. Because we didn't ask.
No, and that's okay. I'm not saying you're wrong for not asking. I'm not, because obviously it would be easy for them to say, "Hey, man, we just got to the combine. Let us see what our roster looks like, and then ask us."
And
yes,
Grote, last thing for you, just the idea that they don't need star players, and I misunderstood how he was saying this, but talking about, star power, you don't have to have that. They want playmakers all over the roster, but they don't have to have that. They just have to have 11 guys doing their job on any given play. I think they need stars.
I think you're right, man. Like playmakers are stars. So
yeah, that's
you know
the
what I
point.
mean? Like he's talking about, we just want playmakers everywhere. Those are stars, Ben Johnson, and maybe Ben Johnson, or maybe that's hyperbole. Like really good players.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we were on the same page, because like maybe Grote heard it differently than I heard it, and I was like, they need really really good players, aka stars.
And the other thing too, Marshall, is that I've been expressing and wondering about too is, yes, of course, you have all the resources in the world to put brilliant talent on this team if you pick the right people. But what about the fact that the Bears, in theory, have this really good, new, innovative, hotshot young coach? Can you start to look at him and say, okay, he's this great head coach, make the players better on the roster? And I always circle DeAndre Swift when I think about that. Do the Bears need to go out and draft a running back? Do they need to go sign a running back? Or
maybe both?
Maybe both, and maybe Ben Johnson can get the most out of DeAndre Swift, and you know what I mean. Like, and that, I think there should be some expectation. If you're going to pay Ben Johnson, the money that they are paying him, near the highest paid coaches in the NFL, then you have to look at him and expect some development out of some of these positions, especially on offense.